out of our office at LinkedIn. He's a content marketing strategist. What that means is he works with some of our most strategic clients in our Australia office to manage their sponsored content campaigns and also gives them strategic advice so they can get the most out of the platform and engage professionals in the right context on LinkedIn. With Yanni's background, aside from his work history, you may be interested to know he's a prolific writer and content creator himself. If you're following Yanni on LinkedIn, you'll see he publishes regularly, often about mindfulness and how important that is to have in our daily lives. Some of his posts have even gone viral and have been picked up by news.com.au. And to round out his personality, he also writes about mixed martial arts as well. So we're excited to have you today to talk about how to use the platform across APAC. And before I hand it over to you, there's just a couple of housekeeping items to share with everyone. So first, if you have a question, please submit it in our chat area. There's a chat box, and please post it to all panelists. There's a couple of us on standby to help answer questions and get them in the queue for Yanni to answer at the end of the webinar. So at the end, we will be taking your questions, and please stick around and take our survey at the end of the webinar. As marketers, we really want to know how we can improve for next time. Another bullet point to let you guys know is, yes, we are recording this session, and we will be sharing it with all registered attendees afterwards. And finally, if you want more information from LinkedIn on a regular basis, please follow us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. There's some handles there. So I'll pass it off to Yanni.
Wonderful. Thank you for the amazing introduction, JB. That's Jennifer Bunting for short. So we've got a lot to cover today, to be honest with you guys. So there's going to be 5 major sections to what we go through today. But first off, success and what I expect for you guys to get out of today's session, broadly speaking, would be to walk away more confident and comfortable with knowing what best practice content marketing on LinkedIn is, broadly speaking, so, and how to apply that for your brand. But as I said, we have major things to cover today. The first one is being a brief history in time. So I'm going to ask everybody to sort of take a step back and look at why sponsored content, so in-feed ads basically, become a product that's producing over $1 million a day at this point for LinkedIn and over 50% of budget for all of our media plans. Basically, it's popular, and why is it popular? The second part of today's webinar will be around thinking like your audience. So this is where I ask you to put your content marketing hat on, guys. So who comes LinkedIn? When's LinkedIn? What are they doing? And why are they coming to LinkedIn in the first place? All these things will tie in with what good content looks like for your brand. Third, we're going to look at content management. So, look, ultimately, content's hard. It's much easier being an MREC and getting that across the web versus a web like this or an ebook. So, once you do those big rock pieces of content, how do you make sure you get the most out of it? That's what it's going to be about. Part 4 will be thinking like an expert. So, of all the brands that are on LinkedIn, doing it well. And in particular, of all that are doing well, when we look at the anatomy of an update, what makes them stand out? Last but not least, management analysis and optimizations. So this is based on the assumption that you've got a campaign up and running. Which it is, what does it look like? How do you measure that? And what are some levers you can pull in the back end to make sure that it only improves over time? So a lot to cover, and I'll dive into it straight away. So first, a brief history in time. How LinkedIn met sponsored content. You may recognize the slide in front of you. This is basically just a screenshot of what the LinkedIn platform looked like only 5 years ago. It was, in short, to be honest with you, more than anything, a job repository. People would go on and update their profile only when they were looking for a job. That's 5 years. 2 things have happened which has developed LinkedIn to the modern platform it is today. Firstly, the use of first-party data. Think about the profile that you set for yourself and all the information that you've offered up. Your function, your industry, your company size, your geography, your questions. What we did was, over the course of a few years, become a little bit more intelligent about how we utilize that data so that we can ultimately deliver to you, in your newsfeed, what is a personalized version of a broadsheet newspaper. That's the first major shift that occurred. And to be fair, both of these occurred across other social platforms, not just LinkedIn. The second was around going across devices. In particular, mobile. We'll talk a bit about mobile later, but about 80% of in-feed engagement now comes from mobile devices, and about 50% of overall traffic to the platform comes from mobile devices. So it's really important that we think mobile first. And of course, culminated to LinkedIn's, not just marketing solutions, but LinkedIn's flagship product. That is all sponsored content and what we're all here talking about today. So that's a bit of background, something to give you some context historically speaking as to how we arrived at this point. Next, this is the point which I'm going to ask you to put your content marketing hats on. I'm going to be talking about who comes to LinkedIn, when to LinkedIn, what they're looking for, and how they come to LinkedIn. And all those things will tie into ultimately what is relevant content as what's engaging content. I'm starting presentations, especially on content marketing, with the LinkedIn mission statement. And while I like talking about LinkedIn, and that's the only reason I'm bringing this up, it's because if content, whether from a broad strategy perspective or on an individual post perspective, is to make the world's professionals more productive and successful. If by the time you hit publish on that post, it makes your audience more productive and successful, then it'll be a high-performing post. Important thing to call out is the second most popular reason out of the top three you have on your screen now why anybody comes to LinkedIn is to actually hear from brands. Now, contextually, when you look at the media landscape, this is really important, also because brands millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars every year looking to disrupt experiences. It could be a television commercial or a billboard. Ultimately, you're having an experience and those ads are meant to interject and get your attention. It's actually the opposite when it comes to LinkedIn. The most popular reason why anyone comes to LinkedIn is to actually hear from your brand. Now, there's a second reason why that's important. That being, whether a brand is present on the LinkedIn platform or not, people are going to be talking about it. So ultimately, it's up to you to decide whether you want to lead that conversation or not. The final thing to call out is the fact that, you remember the slide from 2010? Those days where people are on LinkedIn just for jobs, we get 10 times more engagement with in-feed content than we do with jobs. So, as the headline of this slide suggests, LinkedIn is a place where cat memes just won't cut it. And the reason for this is because there's a mindset divide that occurs when you compare personal networks and professional networks. When you investigate the trending content and keywords on the LinkedIn platform, you're looking at things that are intrinsically motivating people. Things that will ultimately involve them being better versions of themselves are what works well. So therein lies the difference between killing time, just scrolling through a feed, or investing time. And it's this I tie back to the difference between liking a page on Facebook versus following a company on LinkedIn. I think it is very important and a little bit more. So you've seen this funnel before, or at least a different version of it at some point. It's typically aligned with marketing automation, which is fine. It's only recently that we've looked to adapt that to a content marketing schemata, so you can go, okay, based on where you perceive your audience to be and their relationship to your brand, links for relevant content will be your understanding of that person. So if you know that your target audience is in an awareness stage of any of your brands and products, then it's probably the wrong thing to delivering them content that would sit closer to the selection/implementation stage. You don't want to be asking somebody to marry you on the first date, and the same goes for content marketing. I'm getting some internal lights on that one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at each of those 4 different stages. We're going to look at what would be the goal of the content with that stage, as well as the type of content that would be consumed and applicable to that stage, as well as using Marketo as an example of a brand that aligns content well to different stages of the funnel, right? And look, Marketo being a marketing automation platform, they should have this pretty down pat, and they actually do, and you'll see how. So, interest and awareness. The goal here is pretty self-explanatory. It's to increase interest and awareness of your brand through ungated content. Now, I say ungated on purpose because if you're targeting people with content that's gated, but they don't even have a relationship with you, they're going to get a lot of mickeymouse@gmail.com. So you need to be able to build trust before you can ask for that. The type of content that does well, it's shareable and easily consumed content. Now's the time to be delivering ebooks to people. It involves listicles, videos, infographics, blog posts. Looking at a little bit further down the funnel, there's the consideration stage. So it's at this point where, yeah, the audience knows who you are, they vaguely understand your products. How do we get them from that point to actually considering you as a partner? Well, again, the goal here is to understand, based on persona-based marketing, who is your audience and what are their pain points as professionals. It's from a point where you can deliver them content to make them more productive and successful. So, what sort of content actually does this for you? Reports, podcasts, something a bit media that ultimately, at the end of which they consume it, they go, okay, based on the fact that you've given me this, I consider you a potential business partner. It's a great example of Marketo doing this well, where they produce posts on the LinkedIn platform, ultimately aiming to drive people from the platform to the landing page, whereby they've gated their content, so they type in your email address, they can know you through the very fact we're talking about. In exchange, you're getting an ebook, or introduction to mobile marketing. So again, is this audience of who you are as a brand as well as your products? Not only are they considering you as a potential partner, but they actually prefer you. So this is all about getting on the short list, especially when we talk about tech companies. The short list is often only 2 to 4 different brands. So how do you make sure you're on there? Because ultimately, if you're not going to get considered. So the goal for the content in this stage of the funnel is to establish your brand as a trusted business partner through content that delivers compelling proof. Explain what I mean by compelling proof. So it means delivering content from a platform that is perceived as a little bit more objective. So it's one thing for Marketo to talk about Marketo, but it's another thing for Marketo to attend a conference where potentially other people talk about Marketo. This is the reason why case studies work so well, because you've got somebody else talking about you. This is to deliver that compelling proof. So the pointy end of the funnel, selection and implementation stage. So the goal here is to actually gain commitment from your prospects and produce quality leads. It's to bring the A leads from the B leads from the C leads, and so with content that has a strong call to action. You want to know that you're delivering content at this stage in the funnel that if somebody interacts with it, you know that they're interested and they're ready to have, for example, a salesperson reach out to them. So that's high-touch content. A webinar, a buying guide. You're not really downloading a buying guide unless you're interested. ROI calculators, discounts and offers. These are all high-interest content. And again, it's another example of Marketo doing this really well. So this is them hosting a webinar on personas and content marketing. In that webinar, or even this one, you're probably not going to do it unless you're really engaged on the platform. Therein lies Marketo's full content marketing plan, all the way from interest and awareness down to selection and implementation, and hopefully, as that droplet suggests, acquisition afterwards. So mindset piece we've covered now, who's on the platform, why they're there, and once they're there, what they're doing. The next stage of today's webinar will be around content management. And I spoke to the fact before that content's hard, to be honest with you, but it's ultimately worth it because of the sort of engagement over a long period of time that you produce with your audience. So how does your content work hardest for you? That's what really we're going to be touching on. We try to simplify the process a little bit, and the suggestions that we're going to lay out here are either for brands that haven't quite got started or want to rethink the way that they're segmenting their content. And it'll make sense as I go through it. So one potential pill to look at would be company updates. And this part is really around providing transparency transparency in your brand. I spoke to the fact before that the second most popular reason why anyone comes to LinkedIn is different brands. Well, this is where that content would sit. It'd be the, oh, we've hit 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, or it could be, got a new CMO. Ultimately, it's about providing transparency into your brand. As a note, we do know that a high percentage, up to 80% of people that follow your brand are considering working for your company at one point. So providing transparency has long-term impacts. A potential pillar with which you could distribute content through would be key audience targets. So this is the persona-based marketing that I touched on earlier. Understand who has propensity to purchase your products, and then based off that, understand what their pain points are as professional, and then deliver them content for that. This could be a little bit more ROI driven. Industry news. So how are you going to establish your brand as the thought leader with your industry? And ultimately, underscoring all three pillars are success be measured. Company updates and industry news, it could very well be the number of followers that you have to your company page. Or alternatively, for the key audience targets, it could be more out-driven, cost per lead, total downloads, things of nature, more action-based. So, we know that so many marketers are just not getting the most from their content. Ebooks can often cost between $3,000 and $6,000. So how to make sure that from that investment, you're getting the most possible distribution, awareness, and reach. So look at a couple of suggestions as to how you can cut that up and what works well on the platform. Let's say you start with your big rock content. Rock being a piece of content that has a lot of investment in it. It's the paper, it's the ebook that's 90 pages long. What do you do from that point? Well, one suggestion is to produce posts based on different value propositions or findings. So let's say Marketo, right? And you've used a white paper on the 15 reasons why it's important to consider marketing automation for 2015. What you do is jump to that white paper and go, okay, there are 15 reasons here. Let's produce a post based on each of those 15 reasons. Design is an option, and to be honest with you, it would be great if it was. Use that because infographics perform extremely well on LinkedIn. They're highly shareable, they're very snackable, and see them do well. Using old content. Look, quite honest, not enough brands have a strong enough awareness of all the content they've produced over a long period of time. You have a good grasp of that. Then you can repurpose that content over a long period of time simply by placing a headline or changing an image, especially if it's evergreen content. Evergreen being something that is somewhat timeless. And look, by producing something along the lines of a white paper or an ebook, pull any graphs and post them as teasers to the landing page. So you're on the LinkedIn platform, you see a graph that's pulled from the white paper, you click on it because you want to see more, and then of course you get to the landing page where your email's asked for to be able to get the whole thing. It's basically what I mean as a teaser. So you may have seen this from some of Jason Miller's stuff, who's the lead for content marketing at LinkedIn globally. He likes to talk about how having a really good content marketing mix is like having a good mix. You want a lot of different things. You don't want to, having cake every day, or you don't want to be having roast every day. So how can you make sure your content is similar? You don't want to be delivering ebooks every day, but you also don't want to be delivering culturally funny posts every day. So what does a good mix look like? So let's analogize that into the food groups, and we'll talk about just some examples as to how you can do that. So Monday, it's the spinach. So this sort of content that's good for you, but difficult to chew. Something that needs a bit of investment. So it's the blog posts or the case studies. Tuesday, the roast. So this is consuming. This is the content that you want to, say, consume on your 45 bus ride to or from work. Something that will take a while, but you'll be more productive or successful for it by the end of it. These are strategic research analysis pieces, the big rock content, the 90-page ebook. And there's the all brand or the cereal. So this is basic content that you can get out there quickly. It could be the content that's produced from that list that I spoke to, something that's repurposed quite easily, checklists of that nature. Then they say Tabasco is chosen strategically here because brands that have a strong point of view of the platform tend to perform better. It means they're more likely to be perceived as thought leaders. So it's with a bold statement or a strong point of view, something to differentiate your brand from all the others. And then there's Friday. This is the cake. This is the one everyone wants a second piece of. So it's just more casual stuff. I've seen from Telstra, which is a telecommunications leader in Australia, they sent a post out that aligned Justin Bieber's meteoric rise through music to how we can relate it to ourselves in the workforce. And that performed well. So, look, you wouldn't want to be doing that every day, but it's something to consider as your overall marketing mix, as something to do with it, but done well. So an opportunity to produce lots of content and then would optimize towards the best performing piece, utilizing direct sponsored content. Now, sponsored content is just the technical name that we have at LinkedIn for dark posting. So it just means that when you deliver this content as part of a campaign, it won't actually go to your follower base, and it won't sit on your company page. It actually skips both those things and goes directly into the newsfeed of the people that you're looking to target. So we need to do something along those lines. So the first post that they produced was the one at the top. Result, but only after they split tested the copy by producing a second post, and add the word entrepreneurs at the front, you'll see, and they got a 2x uplift in their engagement. So Y as an example is to A, how you can produce multiple pieces of content, and B, split test them for great results. Not just the teaser text that you can split test, it's the image and the line. Practice content management and campaign management is more based around the assumption that, okay, you understand your strategy from a top line perspective, you understand your audience, you've got your content ready to go, and you launch a campaign. You do that then? Well, just some tips on how you can go about it. So, always run 4 to 5 pieces of content at a time to each audience. And there's a couple of reasons why this is important. The first one being that, if, for example, we had Jennifer in the room, right? And Axis Bank wants to target Jennifer with a piece of content. That can only show once every 48 hours. So if you reach Jennifer multiple times within a short window, you want to deliver multiple pieces of content. It tells a richer story. The other reason why it's important to have lots of content is because you optimize towards the best performing piece. If you actually do run a campaign and set targeting as people in a director and above level position, and you commit $5,000 to that audience, have 5 pieces of content running to it, each of them get $1,000 each. You'll optimize towards the best performing piece of content so that the overall performance metrics of the campaign lift with it. Rotate content frequently. So always 4 to 5 running at any one point and not more. However, potentially on a weekly basis, look at what piece of content isn't performing well and get a new one in against it. Align it to target audience groups, not content posts. That's something I spoke to earlier. So don't have piece of content A only going for 1 week with much budget. You want to have ongoing budget running over a long period of time targeted to an audience and have multiple pieces of content run to the audience. And lastly, as I spoke to earlier, republish evergreen high-performing content on a regular basis. Give us out of your content. So, thinking like an expert, this is my favorite part of the presentation or the webinar today. We're going to look at what makes good content on the platform. We're going to call out specific examples, and we're even going to go as granular as to look at the copy within those examples and talk about what it is about that copy that means that it did well. So for that, we're going to look at the 3 different types of updates that can actually be distributed on the platform. The first one is just your standard sponsored update with a thumbnail image. This is the way you, as you see with the teaser text, lead with that, paste a landing page link, and push that landing page and produces a post that looks like this. Great for blogs, driving to a landing page. With larger embedded image posts. These are great because it's image-based to elicit an emotional response from your audience. Again, these are when you sponsor as direct sponsored content live with a single click on the image to the landing page, I'd strongly recommend using a lot of these. And not least, you've got videos as well. These videos can be consumed in pretty well two different types of on the platform. So let's say, for example, you click the link that sits after the teaser text. That would mean that link would drive you off platform to where it's hosted, mostly on YouTube. Alternatively, if you were to actually click the play button that sits over the top of the thumbnail, it would extend over the newsfeed and you can watch the video whilst leaving the LinkedIn platform. So those are different types of updates that you can produce. In the end, we're going to look at best practice now. So we look at different ways. There's what you say, so the themes of the content, what is the actual content, what's it trying to convey and what works, and then how you say it. So not the nature of the content, but how do you communicate that through the form and update. So there are things that sit under each of these things that mean it performs well. For you say, there's value. So a piece of content is valuable if it makes the target audience more productive or successful. So I consider a piece of content relevant if it understands its audience and addresses the pain points of the audience. There's an voice. Look, for a reason, a lot of brands, when they come to LinkedIn, they feel like they're going to be a little bit boring. It just means that it's the total opposite. When a brand sits back and goes, okay, and this is something that I encourage brands to do. If you think about your brand, if your brand was a person, what would that person's personality be? Are you that shy through your tone and voice in the update? If so, you should be. Storytelling. Storytelling is probably one of the reasons why case studies work really well, because as great as it can be for journalists to talk about General Motors, it's hear other people talk about General Motors as well. What's how you say it? So when it comes to copy, less is more. If a word is needed, get rid of it. Imagery. So a good litmus test for whether you have a good image is put your hand over the copy before you send your update out. If you take your image as a standalone object, tells the story of the update well, and actually reflects the copy and tells the same story, you've got a good image. There's the action. One of the most important things about your copy, it needs to be really clear what action you want your audience to take. Of course, mobile friendly. What you say. We're going to be examples of posts that do this stuff really well. So, Marketo. This brand, again, we touched on them utilizing content to target audiences throughout the funnel. They do it really well. Firstly, this post is a great example of copy that clearly conveys how consuming the content will make their audience more productive or successful. Leads with that. People will drop off from engaging with your content with the first 3 or 5 words. So you want those first 3 to 5 to be really engaging. Marketo well here. Marketing best practice. You know exactly what you're going to get and how it's valuable. I'd also call out the image. It actually reflects and supports the value of the copy. And I think you probably looked at the image before you looked at the copy. The sign of a great post. Relevance. So this is about understanding your audience and then bring their content based on what you think as a professional. So here are posts from Qantas, both of which are focused on solving the pain points. From breakfast meeting to boarding in just 3 clicks. They know their audience is time poor. Another thing about this copy is that it calls out the audience explicitly. It uses the word you. And of course, what they've done here with this campaign is use a variety of post types. So they didn't just use thumbnail posts, or they didn't just use the larger embedded posts, or just videos. They actually used all of them. And we see with campaigns that utilize a variety of post types, the overall performance metrics of the campaign lift. While more variety is also better. The voice of your updates. Again, if you have a relaxed, casual, tummy even tone, then your content is likely to perform well. exactly what BT Financial have done here. It's snappy, helpful, and casual. They've done so by talking in that casual way to us. It's financial year, so open some bubbly. And in case you know, bubbly, colloquial for champagne, of course. So your teaser text, you don't want any longer than 150 characters so that it can optimize to mobile, because if it's any longer, you're going to get the dreaded read more button. And let's be honest, every click is precious. And they've got a great line. Typically, the first place that anybody looks is the headline, and they've done this really well. 6 tips to get ahead in the new financial year. And that's exactly what a listicle is. 6 tips. For what reason? We know that odd numbers tend to work better, but that's just an interesting factoid to take away with you today. Is that the post explicitly demands the audience's attention. Ask yourself, where's your tax return going? Then telling. So, like I said, BT Financial can talk about BT Financial, but ultimately, if they can talk about somebody else and then relate that back to their brand or back to some products, then it's going to perform even better, because we can relate to Kaz and hear how Kaz did it more than we can relate to BT Financial Group. So it engages the audience firstly by using a question right at the beginning of the teaser text, but it actually gives the protagonist a name, which of course means that it's more personable. Kaz. And again, then some listicles. So content, and when I talk about content, I mean the blog post or the webinar or the ebook. Then you say it, you frame it well to be able to drive to those things off platform. Well, copy is really important. So again, BT Financial Group, a real dramatic headline. I wish someone had told me. That feeling of regret, even without being worried about it, instills itself in you. To think copy again, you want it less than 150 characters for a teaser text so that it does well on mobile. And Axis Bank has done really well here, is call out the name and the title of that person with your business. And it means two really. If you don't know who Rajiv is in this example, you're asking yourself, oh, this person is clearly important, why don't I know who they are? But if you do know who they are, then you're likely to relate to the post. So that's an excellent tactic to utilize. The imagery, which is really important. For one thing, I bet that when you looked at these updates, you probably looked at the image first. As a great litmus test for a good image. It's shareable and snackable. So we see these sort of updates, viral amplification. So Qantas delivers this post to my news feed. Jennifer and I are connected on LinkedIn. If I interact with it in a social way, so that means like, comment, follow, then as a result of that, that'll appear in Jennifer's feed. And these are the sort of posts that do that well. Also a single click to the page once you sponsor it. Question. So it needs to be really clear what action you want your audience to take. They were told what to do. So make it as ambiguity, rather. So and Microsoft have done great things here in that the copy is clear in what action they want their audience to take. Click here, read, register now. Strong verbs, action words. So that learn tends to perform well. A couple of reasons. It articulates the value of clicking through, but also it aligns itself to why people come to the platform. They're here to invest in themselves. So it would make sense that the word learn would resonate with them. And it effectively engages by calling out the audience. Microsoft has used within the beginning of their teaser text, they're actually running this event in Sydney. It's time. And the mobile friendly nature of the update is so important. It comes in not just the image, but also the copy. So the teaser text needs to be less than 150 characters. The headline needs to be less than 70. And finally, if your landing page can be mobile optimized, or at least mobile friendly, that's a great start as well. What we've produced here is a bit of a guide to great content on LinkedIn. So there's a few things to take into account here, and there's them in total. So does the content actually add value to the audience? Does it make them more productive and successful? understand them well and how to make them more productive and successful? Is there a tone and voice to the post? Does the brand understand itself well and convey that? How is it mobile friendly? Does it call to action? Does the image support or reflect the copy? Because obviously, if it does do that, it's more likely to produce a post that gets high engagement. So finally, we're going to be at campaign management, analysis, and optimization. So again, this is on the assumption that you've basically figured everything else out before this point to launch with a campaign on LinkedIn. So now we're talking about what does a good performance even look like? Well, let's look at some mean results in the Asia Pacific region. So one is the click-through rate. So, I mean, in terms of what value you can extract from a click-through rate, the way that I reflect on it, if I ask myself, well, to what degree is a post actionable? Can it be clicked on? It's social. And that we measure click-through rate. The difference between the click-through rate and the engagement rate are the actions. So if you produce a post and then put paid media behind it, if someone's on the, for example, headline, landing page, thumbnail, logo, these are paid clicks. However, the social actions are free. So that's the likes, comments, those shares. It's with social actions that you produce an engagement rate. Of course, another measure of success that's quite typical is cost per click. And this will vary depending on region as well as audience. I mean, ultimately, if you're looking to target a CEO versus somebody who's in an entry-level position, imagine it as being like a triangle. It's a bidding auction-based system. So you're going to have competitive brands bidding for the same people. Ultimately, you've got the CEO at the top of that point end of that triangle, and there's fewer of them and more people trying to win them. So that'll mean it's more expensive. This game's live now. How do you optimizing it? Well, 4 ways. There's the content, the budget. So how much budget have you actually committed to different audiences? How can you play around with that budget so that it's used effectively? There's the targeting. So who are you reaching? And then there's the bid. I spoke to the fact that sponsoring is purchased in an auction-based system, real time. So you have, for example, General Motors and Toyota, each looking to target the same audience. We'll talk about who wins and how. So first things first, I'm going to go through each of those levers individually. Always want to look at your content first, because ultimately it's the easiest way of changing a campaign. The increase of a cost per click bid should really be the last thing you do. So if you find that your click-through rate is below a benchmark, then go back to the checklist that I spoke about and tailor your posts. So ask yourself the question, does a teaser text or your teaser text call out the audience? You need to support or reflect the value of the copy. Your head well, it's often the first thing that your audience will see, so it doesn't have a clear value proposition. The second way you can optimize your campaign is to shift budget around based on the performance. So at a campaign where we're targeting 2 audience groups, the first one being those in a director or above level of seniority within business, over with companies 200 and above, as well as the second audience being IT professionals, again, within companies that are only 200 and above in size. That the click-through rates were okay, but we wanted to make a bit of a change, see how we could improve it. So we target based on skill sets, a little bit more granular, but also something that can scale well. And when you look at the results based on click-through rate, we of course saw an improvement among skills. So you'll note that the status bar across each of the 2 prior campaigns is switched off. That's because we committed the remaining budget, apologies for that, we committed remaining budget to the skill sets target group. So that's just an example as to how you can run a campaign and potentially halfway, a third of the way through, is budget based on audiences and their performances. So I love targeting because, look, as marketers, it's very easy to get excited about LinkedIn's data, right? And so you should. but we don't want to get to a point where we're targeting accountants with sideburns. It's like, how can we think a little bit more broadly of targeting, ultimately to the benefit of your campaign? So one thing, I heard this a little while ago. I think it pertains really well to targeting. So if you got the statue of David as an example, right? The statue of David wasn't built by cobbling together different pieces of stone. Rather, it started with a large piece of stone that was chipped that way over time to produce what was left over. That's a good analogy to approach your targeting with. Start with a broad piece of stone and chip away at it over time rather than cobbling together different target audiences. Perfection is often not affordable. Again, the analogy of CXOs. I mean, ultimately, if that much more, worth potentially just back on your content and trusting your content to do the targeting for you rather than having a strong ring fence around who you do or don't want to target. So just putting a bit of faith in the robots. So we optimize based off two different levels. So the first one is, of course, the pieces of content that are performing best. So if a piece of content A is doing better than a piece of content B, we'll put more budget to A automatically. The other way you automatically optimize is to target audience groups. So let's say, for example, that you're targeting managers and above as a seniority within your respective geography. You find that, say, for example, directors, which are above managers, are engaging really well in a finance industry. We're going to favor impressions and budget towards them. So robots. We see increase with broader audiences, as well as the potential virality of the post. Talk about the buyer journey, and we used Marketo as an example before. It's often just too complex to target a niche audience. For example, 40% of the IT committee exists outside of the IT function. As another example, myself and a counterpart recently looked at all of the CIOs in Sydney. There were 1,600 of them, but only 1,000 of those 1,600 mapped information technology as their function. So therefore it means that 100 out of 100 CIOs in Sydney don't even consider themselves in IT. So if you did just IT targeting as a function, you would have missed out on almost or over a third of them. So a little bit more broadly, and finally, trust your audience to self-select. Sponsored content is often purchased on a cost-per-click basis. And I don't know about you, but I'm clicking on any content that I'm not interested in. And at the same time, if I see content delivered to me that I don't perceive to be totally relevant, I'm not going to perceive the brand worse for it. I just see too much advertising by this point. So then, what do you take out of this? Well, if you walk away going, well, I just can't do it, my audience is too niche, then go broad as well. So if you have a niche audience size, over with a separate campaign where you target a broader audience. We had the example before of Microsoft. Just build out a separate campaign, run them both simultaneously, see which one performs better, and then optimize towards it. It's worth also talking about the auction very briefly. So again, you can purchase based on two different buying models, one cost per 1,000 impressions, the other one being cost per click. To be fair, 99% of brands on the platform purchase on a cost per click basis, and you have to have a pretty strong use case to not do so. In both cases, you'll only ever pay enough to beat the highest bidder. So you're bidding 10 per click and the next highest is $5, you pay $5.01, not $10. So that means that winning a bid is both a function of the bid itself as well as the engagement rate. So if Microsoft with an engagement score of 0.8 and a $3 bid, then we give them a score of 24. We multiply 8 by 3. There you go. If IBM, who also to target the same audience, has an engagement rate of 0.3 and a cost per click of $5, which gives them a score of 15, it means that Microsoft wins. So what's important to take away here is the fact that having good content and strong engagement rates, it's actually cost efficient because your bid doesn't be as high because we take both the bid and the score into account when it comes to winning. Then we've just produced a bit of an EBC for bid strategy and daily caps. So always start your campaign with a high bid to ensure you're competitive in the auction. Lower if you're hitting your daily caps after a week of activity. And consider running uncapped campaigns if strict flight dates aren't important. So if you've got $500 to commit over 5 weeks, ask yourself, separate it by delivering $1,000 a week, or if you deliver it in 1 week, depends on strategy, really. So everything, guys. Just a bit of a takeaway recap slide here. So there are 4 major takeaways that I'd like you guys to reflect on after today. The first being that our audience wants and expects to hear from you. So make sure that you're always on the platform in an organic way, measuring your followers, but also sponsored to reach more people. 2, consider where your target audience is in the buyer journey and deliver them relevant content based on that. 3, make use of your big rock content. It's lifting. We know that content is hard, so produce multiple posts to do it due justice. And targeting. If your audience is niche, then go broad as well. That's everything. That's all the slides today, guys. So we're going to do a bit of Q&A now.
Thank you, Yi. It's pretty engaging. We have quite a few questions, and you may have seen me typing. There's quite a few conversations going on. So I'm glad to actually, one is super engaged and interested.
I got a high engagement score.
Yeah, and speaking of scores, before I move into the Q&A, just if you can exit the WebEx, please take our survey at the end. It's really important for myself and my colleague, Christy Tran, who's on the line, helping with the questions as well, so that we know what kind of content to do next time. So let me dive into some of the questions. One of the ones that came up, so you talk about organic posts and sponsored posts. How often should a brand be doing those organic posts on LinkedIn?
Yeah, look, the news, obviously the bad news, depending on how you look at it, is that there's no science behind it, right? So ultimately, a couple of ways that it could be looked at. Look at LinkedIn and their company page on LinkedIn, who's better, right? And they post about 3 to 4 times a day from an organic standpoint. So they don't put media budget behind it. So I say 3 to 4 as best practice. This is perfect world scenario. If you're producing 1 to 2 posts a day, or even 3 to 4 a week, that's still a good result. So the more the better, but don't freak out if you're not doing 3 or 4 a day.
Got it. It depends on the content you have.
Yeah, and from a sponsored perspective, I touched on it earlier. So when you start a campaign, produce 4 to 5 different posts per target audience, and then look to rotate potentially on every 4 or 4 days or weekly basis with 1 to 2 new pieces of content. Keep it fresh.
Got it. Good point. Next one. Analytics, always important for marketers, so not surprised to see some questions here.
Yeah, for sure.
What demographic data can you access to understand the performance of your campaign?
So the demographic data that you can pull is aligned with the ways that you can target on the platform. And 5 major ones. So there's company size, range anywhere from sole traders up to 10,000 or above enterprise-sized companies. There's the function, so I would be in an operations or consulting function. Jennifer, you'd be in a marketing function. There's industry, so we're in the tech industry, but you can target by that as well. There's, of course, geography, so we're in Australia right now. And then finally, there's seniority. So if you're a manager, you've got direct reports. If you're a director, you manage people that manage people. And that's just the 5 ways you can target, but also the 5 major ways that you can pull data. So you can know that at the end of a sponsored content campaign, that your content resonated particularly well with directors and with people in the finance industry, just as an example.
Excellent. Okay, this one had a lot of conversation going on. You talked about listicles. Well, Yanni, but for those on the phone, Dan Roth is our head of editorial content for LinkedIn out of New York City. Works with a lot of our influencers like Richard Branson and others.
Sure.
Dan wrote a post not too long ago about the death of the listicle. So we see that these are working for some brands, but are they out of vogue, and how often should a marketer think about using a listicle? Yeah,
look, ultimately, Dan comes from an editorial background, and, as a result of that, he's probably got a very purist perspective on it, and I know that editors hate listicles. So, look, for that reason, I would say a bit of caution. You don't want every single one of your posts to be a listicle, but ultimately, when we look at not content as in publisher posts, but sponsored content from brands that perform well on the platform, we do see quite a few listicles. Ultimately, it manages expectations from people before they go to click further as to how much content they're going to consume. So we do see do well. I mean, potentially 1 in 5 posts could be a listicle. I wouldn't want to see any more than that just because it becomes a bit repetitive.
I think it gets back to your slide about the diet and the days of the week.
Absolutely.
Got it. So listicles would apply into that brand muffin?
I think it was all brand. I think it was cereal, yeah.
Yummy.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So moving on from food, hopefully that added a little clarity to some people online.
Are you hungrier?
Yeah. In your opinion, let me read this to myself to make sure I voice it correctly. Okay. So what is your opinion of the value of a long-term content strategy versus a campaign-by-campaign integrated approach using other like online, offline channels, how they play together?
Yeah, look, both really. You should have your strategic, long-term, big-picture plan, and if you can plan this out a year in advance, that's amazing. But a lot of brands just can't.
Is that realistic?
Well, you know, it's hard to do. So say you do that long-term plan, and then you understand you're well enough to be able to interject within that time frame what key dates are for you. So I recommend having an always-on strategy that's bigger over the course of months. That would be organic, where you'd sponsor whenever you seem relevant, but then building on top of that campaign-based. So, you know, we spoke to the slide earlier that divvy the content into 3 silos. It could very well be that your thought leadership and your company updates would be that always-on content over a long period of time. And then separate to that would be your persona-based marketing, where you know that, you know, when the owner is your persona in this instance, and you want to target him from February through March. That's just an example. So I'd say both at the same time.
Got it. Thank you, Yanni. And I had a few more questions. We only have a couple minutes left, so let me just do a quick look to see maybe what is the most popular one, so we can address for most of the people online. Okay, so this might need to be maybe our last one. Evergreen content and the value of refurbishing content. How often is curating content okay for a brand?
Look, there is no science behind what ratio it should be, but I think it can be a good strategy because it does lend credibility to the content, especially if it's third-party content that's got that objectivity behind it. I spoke to the importance earlier of Marketo just content about them being at a conference. Again, that's a great example of doing it. But if we're working with that, say, 5-day-a-week strategy, again, and listicles only appearing at a most within every 5 pieces of content, I'd probably say the same ratio for repurposed or curated content.
Got it. There's so many more questions coming in. I think we're running really short on time. So I think what we'll do is we'll take your questions as they've come in, and we'll try and have one of our associates follow up with people after the webinar. But I do want to thank you, Yanni, for joining us today and sharing what you've learned over the past few years at LinkedIn and other content creating you've done. Hopefully it was as entertaining for others as it was for me. I definitely will not ask the customer to marry me in my first post. So thank you for that. And for everyone on the line, thank you so much for joining in today. And please take our survey at the end so we can give you the content that you want in our next webinar next month. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.